Hello everybody, it's Jade. I haven't posted in a while, but at least now I have my college degree, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. I am going to be trying something new today, which is instead of having spent 10 to 12 hours writing a script for a video, I created this stack of note cards. Sticky notes that are shaped like the letter J, that have a single word descriptor of what my topics are. And I'm going to see if this works better for me or not. So as a little experimental video, this week I'm covering Lore Olympus, which I binged in the last 3 days and probably could have created better content about if I had paid more attention and known that I was going to make a video in advance, but whatever. So the first sticky note says myth. So Lore Olympus is an adaptation of the Hades and Persephone myth. And if you don't know what that is, it's this ancient Greek classic myth, or it's part of classical mythology, about the origin of how the underworld gained its queen. So Demeter, or Demeter, was the goddess of the harvest. She had a daughter named Persephone. As the legend goes, her daughter Persephone was out picking daffodils in the field one day when Hades, the god of the underworld, came and stole her away and forced her to be his wife. And Demeter, extremely worried about her daughter, plunged the earth into basically another ice age, froze a bunch of humans to death, and searched the earth for Persephone, but was unable to find her because she wasn't on Earth. She was in the underworld. Eventually, Demeter found her way to the underworld, where she discovered that Persephone was there, and tried to make a bargain with Hades that she could have Persephone back, provided Persephone hadn't eaten anything while she was there. But in that time, Persephone had eaten a single pomegranate seed, which was enough to seal her fate. So, as a compromise, Persephone spends half of the year in the underworld and the other half of the year above ground. And because of this, Demeter puts the world into cold weather half of the year and warm weather the other half. And the interpretation of this myth, since it came out, or since it was written. Now, I'm probably bastardizing this. I've never read the original myth. I've only read like 5 different adaptations of it. According to the classic interpretation, Hades kidnapped this young girl, and of course Demeter was in the right to freeze all those people to death. But there's a newer interpretation that has been gaining more traction recently that is, well, what if that's just what Demeter wants us to believe? In classical mythology, Demeter sent a variety of young heroes, including Theseus, to go try to find her daughter and bring her back to Earth. But what if Persephone was trying to escape her mother? We know that Demeter is willing to put a lot of mortals in danger to gain access to her daughter, but what if she was controlling? What if she was evil? Or what if Persephone didn't want to see her? Or what if she just plain liked Hades? So there's a lot of different ways that this myth can be viewed. Although some writings of it are pretty unambiguously, they're unambiguous in showing that Hades was not a good guy. But from this point on in the mythos, Hades treats Persephone as his queen. She's not his concubine. She's a person who makes decisions on behalf of the underworld, which affects, billions of souls. So if he truly kidnapped her and had no respect for her agency, would she have the role in history that she does? And most modern interpretations say no. First time I heard that interpretation was Percy Jackson, but I'm sure it's older than that. I'm currently playing Hades, which does some interesting things with that. And then we have Lore Olympus. Lore Olympus takes a lot of liberties with the story of Hades and Persephone, but it still places a lot of emphasis on actually studying the myth. Actually, I should move on to the next sticky note, which is, what is Lore Olympus? So Lore Olympus is a webtoon comic, which I've been avoiding for many years. Okay, it's only 2 years old, but I've been avoiding webtoons entirely because I get a lot of ads for webtoons on YouTube, so I don't want to download the app out of principle. But I eventually cracked, and I'll explain why later, and downloaded it so I could read Lore Olympus. And basically, it's a long-form comic strip that you scroll down to read, which is the way that I prefer to read manga anyway, so I was pretty comfortable with that. It's pretty simple drawings with, in this case, it has a watercolor look to it, but some of the other examples that Webtoons provided when I was installing the app had quite a bit of variation in the art style. Each chapter is referred to as an episode, and each episode may have music attached to it, but ultimately what you are doing when you are, consuming the media is reading. So I'm not really sure why it's called an episode. Maybe there's other webtoons that require you to scroll along to something that you listen to. I'm also not really sure if the author is intending there to be any kind of pacing to go along with the music. But yeah, I didn't pay too much attention to the music in the first place because it was so sporadic, and I was turning it down. Anywho. So Lore Olympus tells the story of the taking of Persephone in a bit of an imaginative way. In this version of ancient Greek society, Olympus is a modern world with cell phones and laptops and cars, but the mortal realm is still in ancient Greece. In this version of the story, Persephone is a young girl, a young goddess, whom Hades sees at a party and takes interest in. And he's pretty open about the fact that he is interested in her to a variety of his Olympian family members and other parts of Olympian society. So people start putting things in motion that do and don't contribute to the two of them getting together. This story was actually recommended to me by two boys in my D&D group. Actually, I should tell you why I'm doing this video in the first place, or why I read it. So a couple months ago, or actually a month ago almost exactly, I started playing Hades, which is a video game about Hades. And I intend to do a real big, hour-and-a-half scripted video on Hades, because at this point I think it's pretty safe to say that I have developed an actual addiction to this game. I stay up pretty late just about every night playing it, and then I get up in the morning an hour early to play some Hades before going to work. Sometimes when I'm sitting at my desk doing work, I'm thinking about how much I'd like to be playing Hades. Anyway, so I told some of the people in my D&D group that they should definitely play Hades with me. And they said, well, we only want to play Hades if they're using the same characterization as the characterization of Hades and Persephone in Lore Olympus. They said, well, it can't possibly be better than Lore Olympus. So I was like, fine, let me check this out. So that's why I'm reading it. But the two people who have read it in my group are two boys who are normally very into Call of Duty and Halo and Destiny, which I love Halo and Destiny. I don't love Call of Duty. But they said, this is the one love story that guys like. I'm sure there's other love stories that guys like, but my boyfriend really, really likes Kaguya Love is War because all humans do. But Lore Olympus is a romance that is generally enjoyed by most audiences. So I want to move on to my next sticky note, which is romance. And why does it work here for so many people? The thing that these two boys told me about why I should read it, or what makes Lore Olympus so good, is it's apparently the reason people download the Webtoons app. It's the media that's keeping the whole company of Webtoons afloat. So why does it have such wide appeal? I've written down a couple of points, but I think the main thing is that the story maintains a level of respect for the characters throughout. and also gives you, the reader, a reason to respect them and expects you to respect them. Both Hades and Persephone and all of the characters, but especially those two, the ones who are involved in the central romance, they never lose their senses over the romance that they're involved in. They never make poor or annoyingly poor decisions because of what's going on. They're motivated by their desire to be with the other, but it doesn't erase the other concerns that they had. It complicates them. The other thing is, they have 3 to 5 major plot lines apiece that are running throughout the entire story, only one of which is their relationship to the other. Even if their relationship is the heart of this story, it's not the only thing that either of them has going on, which allows the audience to think of them as real people in a situation and not have to roll their eyes when they do something dumb. Second of all, I've mentioned this on this channel before, but I have this serious allergy to passionate displays of affection. My family, when quarantine first started, my family sat down and picked a show to watch all together that we would discuss. That show happened to be Netflix's Love is Blind. Love is Blind, which I was not intending on talking about at all, but here we go, is a show where they took 10 single people, well, 20 single people, 10 of each gender, and had them talk to each other basically over the phone and decide over the course of 10 days which of these people they were going to become engaged to. And then after that, they had a month of wedding planning to decide whether they wanted to actually marry this person they had only spoken to over the phone and not ever seen a picture of. And this series was very interesting and very good for my family because we had a lot to talk about. Is it okay that these two people are so different in age? Is it okay that this person has wildly different sexual habits than the other, or whatever? And it provided a lot of discussion for us that kept us going during what we thought was going to be the only 2 weeks of quarantine. Anyway, but it was very, very difficult for me to watch this series because at least 5 or 6 times an episode, one of the couples was declaring their undying love for one another, and they're just gonna love this other person for their entire lives, and they've never felt this way before. And oh my god, I couldn't fucking take it. I hate it when people get emotional in front of me. And I just realized how bad that sounds, but I just can't stand it. I just can't stand it. One thing that Lore Olympus does is never does that. Hades and Persephone have some very intelligent discussions about their relationship, but the vast majority of their romance is done with a very masterful level of show, don't tell. We see how lonely Hades is. We see how his first girlfriend, the person he's dating at the start of the series, treats him like shit, and we see how she contrasts with Persephone. We see what he's missing in his existing relationship and why Persephone would be better for him. We do not see him thinking to himself, I need a really nice girl to date me, and Persephone fits the bill because she's pink, she's sweet, she has nice tits. Even though he does think all of those things, they come up organically. Yeah. What else on the sticky note? Why want heart? Right. One of the most important aspects to a romance is knowing whether a person wants to be in a relationship, why they want to be in a relationship, and does this person fit that bill? And I think that is the core of why lore Olympus works. We know that Hades is lonely, he's insecure, and he feels fragile and unsafe. He needs somebody who can support him and be his rock and tell him that he's doing a good job, and that somebody loves him. We know that he feels disrespect, or not even disrespected, but unrespected and unloved by the vast majority of his subjects, who think of him as a cold, uncaring person. He needs at least one person who is always going to be in his court, other than his employees. We also know that, right from the beginning, that Persephone feels unrespected by the people in her life. She's treated as a baby. Hades doesn't realize that she's significantly younger than him when they meet, so he treats her as an equal, and she's never been treated like an equal before in her life. We know whether they want a relationship, why they want one, and why the other person fills that need for them, which I think is the bare minimum for making a functioning romance in fiction, and is almost never accomplished. Independence, yeah, I mean, they maintain a whole bunch of other plot lines going on that are also very interesting. So when we see Hades and Persephone interacting, it's a treat. It's something to look forward to. It's not every single frame of the story. Other stuff going on. Thank you. All right. Next sticky note. Things that could have failed. Oh, yeah. All right. So the first one I'm going to knock out real quick. The power imbalance between Hades and Persephone. This will work only if it's executed well at the end. Right now, it does work, but it could fall apart if the author screws it up. So Hades is 2,000 something years old, and Persephone at this point in the timeline is 19. She doesn't know how to do anything. Well, okay, it's not that she doesn't know how to do anything. She doesn't know how to use a computer. She doesn't know how to work in Hades' office, which is her job. She doesn't know much about the Olympians. She was raised basically in a flower garden for the first 18 and a half years of her life. Even more, actually. She just moved out of that flower garden a month before the start of the story. So there is a vast power imbalance with her and Hades, who is the god of wealth and also the god of the underworld. And, you know, he has a bajillion and a half cars, a giant house, 7 dogs. He wears a businessman's suit at basically all times. I almost called him Christian Grey. He's got a lot of the qualities that Christian Grey and Anna have, except, you know, this author's actually trying. No, I think E.L. James probably actually tried. But, except this one's executed well. So there's a massive power imbalance between them. However, that is mitigated, it's addressed in the story. They both are aware of the fact that one of them is older than the other, and they both talk about it. But the most important thing is they respect each other. They don't take advantage of the power imbalance. No one is taking advantage of the power imbalance, which is the important thing. There is a possibility for abuse here, but it doesn't happen. The other thing that contributes to this is that Minthe, Hades' girlfriend at the start of the series, is genuinely abusive towards him. So we see Hades as a person who is susceptible to being manipulated. He is not a chess master. He is not a manipulator. He is a person who can be manipulated, and he is a person who's fragile. This makes it much easier for us to be comfortable with him dating a 19-year-old. Because we know that he's not going to be the Minthe in that relationship. But the other thing that really could have failed is the rape. So, significant part of this plot is the fact that, so Persephone is supposed to become a eternal maiden, like Artemis and Athena, who have vowed to, and Hestia, who have vowed to never have sex ever. Persephone is in training to be one of them, and this allows her to get a scholarship to go to college in Olympus, and she lives with Artemis. However, this means that she is supposed to be a virgin for her entire life. However, within the first month of her being on Olympus, she is raped by Apollo, which basically tells us right off the bat, and tells her, that being an eternal virgin is completely out of the question. It also shows us just how naive she is, because she is completely manipulated by him, and she is controlled by him. He convinces her. He talks her into having sex with him in a way that most girls who have reached the age of 19 would be able to see through. But because she is so sheltered, she doesn't really get it until way later, when Eros explains to her that what happened to her was wrong. I know some people who think that rape should never ever exist in a piece of media, or in any pieces of media. That's silly. But if I had a kid who was 15 and I was trying to teach them about rape and avoiding abusers and stuff, I genuinely don't think there is another piece of media I've ever come across that did a better job portraying manipulation, abuse, and rape than Lore Olympus. I didn't absolutely adore this piece of media. This isn't the same level of recommendation that I would give most of the other things on this channel. But if there's anything that Lore Olympus did incredibly well, it's the characterization and treatment of Apollo, and Persephone's reaction to him. Just incredibly well done. And the love story is pretty good too. Okay, it's good. It's quite good. Moving on, sex in this story. So that brings me to another topic. So apparently this series is going to be adapted into some kind of animated series. I guess. Well, it was bought by the Jim Henson Company, and I probably should have read up on this in advance. But does that mean this is going to be a puppet show? That would be cool. But off topic. But it said that it's going to be aimed at young adults. I'm really interested to see what they do with this, depending on how much they change it, because sex has a very interesting role in this story, and a very pervasive one. It's absolutely inextricable from the rest of what's going on, because for one, the fact that Persephone cannot be an eternal virgin is every bit as important to the plot as her relationship with Hades, or it enables her to even think about having a relationship with Hades. Maybe not enables her. It does grease the wheels a little bit in that regard, even subconsciously. But at the same time, something we see a massive difference between Hades and Persephone with is the fact that he sees sex completely differently than she does. He's been fucking his secretary for X hundred years casually, when she is talked into having sex with her roommate's brother because she thinks that it will allow her to achieve some amount of freedom. We've also got Thetis, who is trying to get Zeus to leave Hera for her. I don't even have anything intelligent to say on this topic. It's just, I want to know how they're going to age this down for a TV show. If they're really intending to age this down for a TV show, I don't know what they're going to do, because the Olympians fucking the mortals, the Olympians fucking each other and their family members is portrayed here because it's a story about Greek mythology. And I don't think you can have nearly the same story if you knock it down even 5%. Yeah. Hades. All right, so I'm gonna do a video on Hades the video game later. I think I mentioned that already. As soon as I finish the game, which I keep dying, I'm not very good, and also I have to finish a cosplay that I'm making for it. 2 cosplays. But it is a story about Hades, and so I want to talk about. Well, Hades the game is a story about Hades the Olympian, or the chthonic god, and so I want to talk about it a little bit here in relation to Lore Olympus. And maybe when I do my Hades video, I might mention Lore Olympus a little bit in that too. But the basic concept of Hades is that you, the player, are playing as Zagreus, the son of Hades and prince of the underworld, as he is trying to escape the underworld. It's a roguelike, which means you start in Tartarus and you try to fight your way out of the entire underworld over and over. And if you die, you have to start over. It explores the relationship between Zagreus and Hades. And Hades in this portrayal is a genuinely abusive father. Consuming these 2 pieces of media at the same time was a massive mistake. These may actually be the 2 pieces of media that are worst to go together of anything I've ever read, because they're almost the same story with almost all of the same characters told in a completely different way, and all of the characters have completely different character designs and motivations and behavior. Very, very confusing, very, very frustrating. Every time I was reading a sentence in this, I was like, Hades would never say that. Meg would never, ever say this. Meg doesn't act like this. Who is this woman and why does she claim to be Nyx? But they're both fantastic pieces of media, and I wanted to compare them a little bit. I only have 2 points about Hades the game, so this isn't going to take too long. The first one is I hate Frozen. I hate Frozen. Why do I hate Frozen? Frozen is about this girl named Elsa who becomes queen because she was born to the king and queen. She definitely should not be queen. She freezes a bunch of people to death. She has no leadership ability. She doesn't know anything that's going on in Arendelle. She should not be queen. Somebody else should be queen. And I don't know if Anna should be queen, but I haven't seen Frozen 2. But definitely not Elsa. This is why I liked Black Panther. Because T'Challa obviously deserves to be king. We see him making the right decisions purposefully for Wakanda. And he chooses Nakia to be his queen, and she also deserves to be queen. She also very much cares for Wakanda and the people that live there. And you're like, yeah, Wakanda has a bright future being led by these 2 people. When I am reading Lore Olympus, I am constantly thinking about, okay, Persephone is going to be queen of the underworld. How are we going to see that she deserves to be queen of the underworld? And this is one of the first things that they talk about in the series. Hades talks about how he's thinking about proposing to Minthe because she would make an okay queen of the underworld. And Zeus and Poseidon say, okay, but shouldn't you find a girl who is the perfect queen of the underworld? When I watch Persephone go about her duties and behavior in the underworld, I want to see her connecting with the people. I want to see her doing a good job at her job dealing with people's files and stuff. I want to see her caring about what goes on in the underworld and its subjects and stuff, because she's going to be the queen. And that's what defines a good story about royalty to me, because otherwise I was raised in America. I have a healthy hatred for royalty. So at one point in the story, Persephone takes a bag of coins and goes and starts giving it to the people who have been waiting to cross on Charon's boat for the last couple of decades. And this is punished by the story. I actually, there was nothing in this entire story that got any emotional rise out of me except when she took the bag of coins and started giving it out on the beach. And I for whatever reason, just made me tear up. I was like, oh my God, look, she's acting like the queen. And then all of the shades that are on the beach start trampling her, and she has to be rescued by Hades. And it's treated as this bad thing that she went and tried to help the people of the underworld. I really want Persephone to be a good queen on the page. I want us to see why she is a good fit for this role. Because, you know, like I said, at the same time I'm playing Hades, which is about the prince of the underworld. And so much time in that is spent. And yes, it's a longer piece of media, so you can have more time with it. But we see Zagreus interacting with the denizens of the underworld, making friends with the people there, making decisions that the prince of the underworld would be able to make. And we see him as an empathetic person who has an actual connection to the citizens that he has the potential to be ruling over. If Lore Olympus doesn't do that, I will consider it to be a failure of the work. The other point relating to Hades, the game, would be the crimes of the Olympians. This is just a difference in the general design of the story, but in Hades, the game, there is this sort of quiet horror that is portrayed about the way that the Olympians behave, and well, all of the Greek gods behave. You know, when Ares causes the death of thousands or millions of people, the other characters treat this as a bad thing. Or even if it's not other characters that treat it as a bad thing, you are expected to feel horror at his actions. At one point in the story, and I guess minor spoilers for closer to the end of Hades, Zagreus starts to approach the surface of the earth, and he, instead of fighting the shades of dead criminals, he is now fighting rats, like actual living rats, and he has to kill these rats in order to continue. And after he does this, Ares sends him a message and says, I sensed that you killed a living thing, and I am just so proud of you for spreading violence and death in my name. And after this, Zagreus has a small existential crisis, and the other characters comment on the fact that he looks miserable. And he tells a friend that he feels incredibly ashamed and awful that he killed these rats, that he took a life. The other lives he's extinguished were ghosts that were just going to come back in a couple of minutes. These rats are now never going to be alive again. And this is treated as a dramatic moment and a character moment for Zagreus. He values life because he sees so little of it. Now let's contrast that with Lore Olympus. Two of our main good characters, Eros and Persephone, have gone on violent rampages in which they killed hundreds of mortal humans, and it is a joke. It's not a joke that Persephone killed all of these people, but in the eyes of the story and in the eyes of the other Olympians, the big deal is that she didn't get permission from Zeus first. you are expected to feel sorry for her for having killed all of these people. Eros killing a couple hundred humans is treated as a traumatic event for Eros, and the same thing when Persephone does it. And it's not taken seriously as a bad thing that has happened at all. And I recognize that when you're telling a story about Greek gods, you know, the scale that they live their lives, they're going to affect people. You can't actually address the smaller scale things that they do on a moral level. At the same time, it was a little bit jarring because I had just passed the point in Hades where Zagreus feels awful about killing a bunch of rats. And then we find out that Persephone murdered an entire village. And the thing that's unfortunate about this is that she didn't ask Zeus for permission, and that this means that she's now going to have to stay in the underworld for some amount of time. It's a contrast, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing about Lore Olympus, but it's definitely a difference between the two pieces of media. All right, so moving away from Hades the game, I want to talk about something that the two things that I think really worked the most in favor of Lore Olympus. First is the author's understanding of mythology. There are a ton of different myths woven in here. And of course, for the people like Rick Riordan, and I already forgot this woman's name who wrote Lore Olympus, and the people who are writing Hades and all that stuff, they have to have an incredible understanding of Greek mythology in order to write what is effectively fan fiction of it. And I want you to understand that when I say fan fiction, I'm not making fun at all. Excuse me. I've written fan fiction for a long time, and I think and I put a lot of effort into doing as much research as possible, making sure that I understand everything about the source material before proceeding. And the author of this has such an incredible understanding of the mythology that she's able to completely bend the myths and still retain an actual resemblance to what's going on under completely different circumstances. She originally commented that the adaptation of the kidnapping of Persephone was going to be when Aphrodite and Eros stash her in Hades' car in the first arc. But we're at the point now where Persephone is hiding from Zeus in Hades' realm. And he has just given her this phone that's called a pomegranate, and she can't contact her mother. And the point is, this is, in my mind, the real taking of Persephone. She's being hidden away from the other Olympians. She's unable to leave the underworld. She's been given a pomegranate and all that stuff. But everything is completely different. The way we've arrived at this is entirely unique to this world. And you can really only achieve that if you have an incredibly high understanding of the original source material, which I think is the major strength of this work. I keep saying I think this is the major strength of whatever, but we're on reduced points this week. Well, reduced number of points. All right, next, humor. The series is very funny, as you can tell by my very serious facial expression. There were so many points when I wanted to screenshot things and send it to my friends that had read this, but I can't because the Webtoons app won't let you, which I understand why. I'm not complaining about the fact that they want to actually pay their artists, but it's very, very funny, and I think that just deserves a shout out. But on the things that may not have worked as well, and I have a bunch of points about this, but they all kind of relate back to the same thing. And this is the one thing that I don't think worked in Lore Olympus, and the thing that really pulled me out, which is the author's treatment and writing of women. And that sounds kind of odd because this is written by a woman, And I do think that she's gotten better over time. But I have 3 main points. First, the girls in the beginning are drawn like sex objects. When Persephone is first introduced, she is wearing a dress that barely covers her ass and pushes her tits as far into her chin as they can possibly go. And I used to read Soul Eater, which is an incredible series written by a man who is afraid that people won't read his work if he doesn't put in something sexy every 5 pages. The same guy that wrote Fire Force, but I haven't read that yet because I'm afraid. The point being that for some authors, they use sex appeal as a crutch if they think that their story might not retain people's attention. And in reality, what it does is make the audience lose respect for the author. Now, over time, this did get better. The art stopped emphasizing TNA nearly as much. But I am a person who doesn't even normally notice this kind of stuff, and I felt kind of uncomfortable in the first couple chapters, like, this is written by a woman? I'm surprised. Second of all, the nymphs. So there's this sub-race. Not even a sub-race. There's this other race of humanoids that lives on Olympus. Well, that lives all over, called nymphs. There's all kinds of nymphs. River nymphs, flower nymphs, tree nymphs. And they're mostly portrayed as floozies. They're dating Olympians, or they're usually somebody who is having a fling with an Olympian, and they hope to retain the permanent attention of these people. They're kind of portrayed as gold diggers. Now, as the series has gone on, we've introduced a couple of nymphs who are not like this. And instead of being an entire race of floozies, I think it's more that the nymphs are supposed to represent your average girl born into middle class, normal life, who is trying to climb by getting into the pants of somebody higher than them. And the only nymphs we see are the ones who are trying to climb by getting into the pants of the Olympians. But it's still a little bit uncomfortable, not gonna lie. Between Minthe and Thetis, there's not exactly a good look. Now, we do now have Daphne, and I have hope for Daphne. But nymphs have been used as an insult throughout the entire series. And it was a little weird, not gonna lie. Finally, we have Persephone's agency in the story. Persephone has probably the least control over things that's going on of anybody in the story, and she's one of the 2 leads. She is shoved into Hades' car. She's manipulated into having sex. She's manipulated into vowing or agreeing to get the scholarship in which she can become an eternal maiden. She's given a job that she didn't even apply for. She doesn't know how to use a computer. She goes on this rampage, and at first I was like, wow, she actually went on a rampage. But it turns out that she didn't even go on a rampage on purpose. She got super mega huge and was stomping around and then accidentally knocked over a bunch of buildings onto civilians. Every time something stressful happens, she faints, and she needs to take a break, or she loses control of her powers. And I know that we're going somewhere with it, but as a pattern, it's kind of annoying that she is yanked around by everybody. She is kind of a cosmic plaything, both the good things that happen to her and the bad things. The people in Hades and Persephone's lives are doing most of the legwork in whether or not they are together at any given time. But I do think that this story is about Persephone gaining control and becoming that queen. And I really hope that that's where this is going, because if not, because a large part of my respect for this story comes from the fact that I think this is going to be about Persephone gaining control of her life and over the underworld. And if that's not where this is going, honestly, I'm going to retroactively think this series was a waste of time. But control is such a strong theme throughout the story that I think I'm right. That this will be about Persephone being the Nakia, the Zagreus, the one that deserves to be the queen. So yeah, that's my 10-minute video on Lore Olympus. Yeah, like I said, I'll try to do these more often now that I am finished with college, but for now, thanks for watching.